The call came in just after sunrise. A body discovered at the edge of a construction site outside Dubai. No identification, no witnesses, nothing except a bracelet still wrapped around a lifeless wrist. Hours later, another alert, another body, miles apart. Within moments, investigators realized both belonged to the same family. Two sisters who had arrived in the city less than 2 days earlier for what they believed would be the trip of a lifetime. How did a dream vacation turn into one of the most disturbing cases authorities had ever seen? Before we go any further, welcome to Crime Deck, where we bring you daily true crime updates. To our loyal viewers, if you find our deep dives as gripping as we do, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a case. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a turning point. Now let's go back to how the nightmare began. The call reached the station just after sunrise. A worker at a construction site on the outskirts of Dubai said they'd found something no one could face alone. When investigators reached the scene, the desert air still felt cool, but the silence around the tarp told its own story. Inside it lay the body of a young woman. No head, no identification, nothing except a single bracelet still clinging to her wrist, as if it refused to let go of the life she once had. Before anyone could process that first scene, another alert came across radio channels. Another body, miles away. This one, a young woman with her eyes removed. No signs of struggle around her. No personal items. No trail leading in or out. Two bodies, both discarded like they were meant to be forgotten. Yet even in their condition, something about them called for someone to pay attention. Detective Julian Ward arrived shortly after the second call. He'd handled cross-border cases before, but something about this morning reached under his ribs and held tight. The drone operator flew a camera over the scene, capturing patterns in the sand, footprints that led nowhere, entire impressions wiped thin by the wind. Ward stood back, studying each image as it came through. He didn't blink much. He didn't speak much either. He just watched, the weight settling on him long before he understood why. As forensic teams worked, Ward focused on the bracelet on the first victim's wrist. A cheap, colorful piece small enough to belong to someone who still believed the world could be kind. He leaned closer. The letters on the beads were faded, but still readable. A matching bracelet would eventually be found in the second scene, but even now, something in him tightened. Whoever these girls were, they'd come here together. That bond still showed, even in death. Local authorities began their early assessment, using formal tone and phrases that tried to distance themselves from what they were seeing. Possibly tourists, one officer said. Could be unrelated incidents, another offered. Ward listened, but the words rolled off him. He wasn't looking for theories. He was reading what the bodies were telling him, and they weren't telling the same story as the officials. As he moved between the two scenes, curiosity cut through him like a sharp line. Who were these young women? And how had their final hours turned into this? The difference in their injuries troubled him. One decapitated, one left without her eyes. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a single moment of rage. It was something else, something arranged, something planned, something that carried purpose. Ward crouched beside the second body and whispered, "I'm sorry," not as an apology, but as acknowledgement. A promise that he would not treat her like a case number or a footnote. He stood up slowly, his jaw tight. He had seen many homicides, too many, but this one hit him in a place he rarely allowed anyone to see. The way they were discarded, the way their injuries differed, the way both looked too young to carry this kind of ending. As more information came in, the tension between agencies grew. Local authorities urged careful language, limited press, and quiet coordination. Ward felt the hesitation. He felt the pullback, and he felt the familiar chill that comes when a case is about to be handled more gently than it deserves. It wasn't fear he sensed, it was avoidance. Someone didn't want a spotlight on this. He pushed for identification. He pushed hard. Hours later, when the names came through, the room fell into a deeper silence. The bodies belonged to Zara and Zoe Bennett, two sisters from the United States. The girls had arrived in Dubai less than 2 days earlier. No record of trouble. No calls for help. No signs of conflict with anyone. Ward stared at the screen as their passport photos loaded. Two young black women with matching smiles, standing shoulder to shoulder. He remembered the bracelets immediately. They wore them together, twins or close enough to feel like it. Their eyes full of promise in the photos felt like a punch now. The next blow hit harder. Their mother had reported nothing. She believed her daughters were safe. She had been sending them messages, waiting for updates, asking for pictures. She had no idea both of her children were now lying in two different parts of the desert. Ward closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. This wasn't just a crime scene anymore. It was a story that stretched far beyond these footprints in the sand. A story involving trust, travel, hope, and a man who had enough influence to make all three look harmless. As the sun climbed higher and the desert brightened, Ward felt the weight of a truth he couldn't yet name. Something about this case was going to test him in a way he wasn't ready for. Something about these sisters would stay with him long after the paperwork was done. The only thing he knew for certain, standing over two lives that ended far too soon, was this. Whatever happened to Zara and Zoe Bennett, it didn't begin here. It began long before they reached this desert, and now he had to find out where their steps first turned toward danger. Before their names reached police radios in Dubai, before investigators stood over the worst scenes of their careers, Zara and Zoe Bennett lived in a quiet corner of Georgia, a place where life moved slow enough for dreams to feel both reachable and far away. Their days were simple, their world was predictable, and their love for each other was the kind that didn't need explanation. Home videos show it best. In one clip, Zoe dances in their small living room, spinning around in socks while Zara laughs in the background, trying to finish homework at the kitchen table. In another, they argue about who stole whose shirt, only to collapse into laughter seconds later. They were different in every way except the one that mattered. They protected each other with everything they had. Their mother, Martha, worked 2 jobs to keep the roof steady and the lights on. She came home tired, but never too tired to ask about their day. Never too tired to remind them that the world was bigger than Georgia and that they deserved to see all of it someday. Even when bills piled up, she told them to dream anyway. Her daughters were her pride, her joy, her reminder that sacrifice meant something. For Zara, those dreams needed careful planning. She made lists. She saved every dollar she could. She looked at life like a glass she had to hold steady. Zoe, on the other hand, chased light. She saw opportunities everywhere. She believed timing was everything, and the world would eventually open its doors if she just kept knocking. Together they made sense. Zara kept them grounded. Zoe kept them reaching. That balance followed them into adulthood, especially on nights they took on catering and staffing jobs around Atlanta to help their mom and pay for classes. Most events were forgettable weddings, charity dinners, corporate retreats. They served food, cleaned up tables, and disappeared into the background like they were expected to. But then came the night of the gala, a high-end gathering hosted by some of the wealthiest names in the region, crystal chandeliers, designer dresses, guests who never looked twice at the staff carrying their trays. The twins blended into the movement of the room, efficient, quiet, unnoticed, until one man noticed them. The footage from that evening shows him stepping forward, not casually, not carelessly, but with intention. Sheikh Karim Al-Nouri, Dubai real estate magnate, a man whose presence alone created space. He didn't approach the other staff. He walked directly toward the twins. He greeted them as if they were guests, not workers. He complimented their professionalism, asked polite questions about their studies, and offered a warm smile that felt practiced enough to be natural. He didn't push. He didn't flirt. He simply treated them like they mattered in a room where they usually felt invisible. Zoe lit up. Not because he was wealthy, but because she wasn't used to anyone seeing her beyond the tray in her hand. Zara responded more cautiously. She answered politely, but her eyes scanned him the way they scanned everything, reading, weighing, deciding what felt right. Karim tipped them generously before leaving, enough to make Zoe gasp, enough to make Zara pause. When he walked away, Zoe whispered to her sister, "Maybe this is our chance." Zara didn't respond right away. She watched him rejoin the crowd with his effortless confidence, her instincts and her hope pulling in opposite directions. Zoe nudged her and said, "Come on, Z. For once, let something good happen." Ward, watching this footage months later, felt a heaviness he couldn't shake. He studied the moment Kareem looked at them, really looked. He wondered what went through that man's mind. Why these girls? Why that night? What did he recognize in them? Was it innocence? Was it ambition? Was it simply opportunity? Those questions pressed on Ward the more he rewound the footage. He wasn't judging the twins. He wasn't blaming them. He was trying to understand the split-second moments in life where hope overshadows caution and danger hides inside something that looks harmless. After the gala wrapped, the staff filed out through the service exit. Zara and Zoe walked to the bus stop laughing. Zoe excited about the generous tip. Zara replaying the encounter in her mind. She didn't voice her concern. She didn't want to ruin her sister's joy. She told herself it was only a conversation, nothing more. But Ward could see the turning point clearly now. This was the first step towards something none of them could undo. The night the girls met a man who would change their lives forever. After the gala ended and the lights were pulled down, Zara and Zoe went back to their routines. They didn't expect to hear from Kareem again. To them, he was just a wealthy host who treated them with a level of respect they weren't used to. But the next morning, a message arrived from an international number they didn't recognize. A polite greeting, a thank you for their professionalism, a line about how they carried themselves with promise. Zoe showed it to Zara with a smile she tried to hide. Zara read it twice, then nodded slowly. It felt harmless. It was just a message. But the first seed had been planted, even if they didn't feel the ground shifting under their feet yet. Over the next few days, Kareem reached out again, never too often, never in a way that pushed boundaries. His timing was precise, quiet enough to seem respectful, close enough to feel personal. He sent Zara a book recommendation about entrepreneurship because she'd mentioned wanting to start a small business one day. She told a friend she thought it was thoughtful. She even joked that no one had ever listened that closely to her before. Zoe received a different kind of message. Kareem complimented her ambition, her energy, her ability to make a room lighter just by being in it. It was the exact thing she always wished people would notice about her. She didn't question how he knew. She didn't question why he remembered. She simply felt seen. Ward watched these exchanges later with a tension in his jaw. Every message, every warm sentence, every gift told him exactly what kind of man Kareem understood himself to be. Someone who didn't chase. Someone who let people step toward him. Someone who shaped interest by amplifying whatever dream a person already carried. Kareem sent photos of Dubai next. Skyscrapers reflecting sunlight. Ocean views. A restaurant built on the edge of the water. He didn't brag. He didn't overwhelm them. He simply shared glimpses of a life far from their world in Georgia. For Zoe, each image felt like an open door. For Zara, each image came with a tug of war between curiosity and caution. Their friends noticed the shift. Zoe talked about the possibilities. Zara kept her voice low, unsure of how she felt. She told one friend, "Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe good things really do happen." She wanted to believe that. She wanted something to change. She wanted her sister to have a moment that wasn't defined by sacrifice. Kareem waited. He let the girls settle into the idea that he wasn't dangerous, that he wasn't trying to impress them, that he simply valued them. Then, when the timing felt right, he sent the message that changed everything. He invited them to Dubai, not for work, not for networking, for rest, for joy, for their first vacation experience. He called it a gift, one he said they deserved for their hard work, their kindness, and their promise. Zoe read the message with her whole heart. Zara read it with her whole mind. Zoe saw adventure. Zara saw risk. But they talked long into the night, weighing dreams against fear, and eventually the idea of possibility won. Ward replayed this moment over and over because he recognized every tactic Kareem used. The spacing of messages, the tone, the personalized gestures, the slow, steady shaping of trust. None of it felt accidental to Ward. None of it felt natural. It was crafted, measured, built to pull the twins closer. One emotional thread at a time. Zoe didn't see that. She saw someone offering them a chance they'd prayed for. She told Zara this was their moment to step into something bigger. Zara still felt unsure, but she didn't want to disappoint her sister. She didn't want fear to dictate their lives. So she agreed. Not out of recklessness, but out of love. Ward paused on that realization. It wasn't naivety. It wasn't ignorance. It was the kind of choice people make when they want something better, something brighter. That's what made their story hurt even more. Days later, their travel documents were processed. Then came the part that made Ward sit up straighter. The visas went through quicker than anything he'd ever seen. Approvals that usually took days or weeks cleared almost instantly. No delays, no questions, no flags. Someone had made sure the path was smooth. Too smooth. Zoe celebrated. Zara tried to ignore the knot in her stomach. And Ward, watching this through emails and digital traces months later, knew this was the moment the ground under the girls shifted from uncertain to dangerous. Their trip was now set in motion, and nothing they did from here on out could stop where this invitation was leading. By the time their visas cleared, the plans moved faster than the girls expected. What started as a simple invitation had now become a countdown. Zara double-checked everything: flights, conversion rates, luggage weight, while Zoe floated through each moment as if life had finally opened a door just for them. Ward watched the digital trail they left behind, and each step forward pulled a knot tighter in his chest. In the days before their departure, the sisters went shopping for outfits. They weren't thinking luxury, they were thinking, what looks nice on camera? They wanted memories they could post, moments they could hold on to. Videos captured Zoe spinning in front of a store mirror, while Zara shook her head, trying not to smile. They bought matching sandals. They shared one suitcase for toiletries. They planned what playlist to listen to on the plane. Their friends stopped by to say goodbye. Laughter filled the house, the kind that makes a home feel alive. Zoe talked about eating food she couldn't pronounce. Zara talked about wanting to see the ocean from the villa balcony. Not once did danger cross their conversations. Not once. And Ward, watching all this after the fact, felt that familiar pain. The kind that lives in the silence between what people expect and what actually comes. The night before the flight, Martha walked into their room holding a small envelope. She had placed just enough emergency cash inside to calm a mother's nerves. She hugged them longer than usual. She told them to stick together, to trust their instincts, to call her the moment they landed. She said, "Send me everything. I want to see the world with you." She meant it. She wanted to travel through their eyes. The next morning, they left home with bright faces and tired eyes, dragging their suitcases to the car. Zara locked the door, checked it twice, then whispered something only her sister heard. Zoe nudged her, promising this trip would be the beginning of something good. Ward watched that footage with a tightening jaw. He hated knowing how wrong that promise would become. At the airport, things moved unusually smoothly. Their tickets had been upgraded without their request. A staff member guided them through check-in as if they were VIP guests. Zara asked why. The attendant just smiled and said their host had arranged everything. That phrase echoed in Ward's mind, arranged everything. He knew what that meant now, but the girls didn't. They filmed short clips in the terminal: snacks, outfits, a quick dance while waiting to board. Small, harmless moments full of hope. Moments that held no clue of what waited ahead. Zoe waved at the camera. Zara tucked her hair behind her ear. They looked ordinary, unaware of how extraordinary this footage would become in the investigation. When they finally boarded, they took a window seat and pressed their faces to the glass. The engines roared. The plane lifted. Zoe recorded takeoff while Zara laughed at how shaky the video was. Ward paused on that laughter more than once. It felt like a goodbye wrapped inside joy. A few hours into the flight, they sent their mother a selfie. Both smiling, both relaxed. The caption read, "Mom, we're safe. Love you." For Martha, it was comfort. For Ward, it became the last image of them alive, unshadowed by what was coming. As the plane crossed into daylight, curiosity began to creep into Ward's voice notes. Why had their documents been expedited with no delays? Why were they given priority boarding? Why were there no security flags, no questions, no verification steps? Someone had smoothed every part of their journey, and Ward needed to know who had that kind of reach. The aircraft touched down in Dubai late evening. The sisters stepped onto the jet bridge, breathless with excitement. They filmed the skyline through the airport windows, towers glowing under the night. Zoe whispered, "This is unreal." Zara nodded. her expression caught between awe and something she didn't have words for yet. They moved through passport control with surprising ease. Their bags arrived first on the carousel. Everything felt choreographed, but to them, it felt like luck. A young couple offered to take their picture in the arrival hall. The twins stood side by side, holding on to each other, smiling wide enough to make strangers smile back. Outside, the air was warm and heavy. Cars pulled in and out of the pickup lane. A man stepped forward holding a sign with their names. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He simply took their luggage and opened the back door of a black SUV. Zoe whispered that he looked serious. Zara didn't answer. She scanned the driver's eyes through the rearview mirror as she climbed in. Ward watched the airport CCTV recording of that moment. The driver's face didn't shift, no greeting, no warmth, just a blank expression as he pulled the door closed behind them. The SUV merged into traffic, disappearing into the night. And that was the moment Ward marked in his notes with a single line. This is where the girls leave safety behind. The SUV carried the twins through the city, as if gliding through a postcard. Dubai at night didn't look real to them. Towers lit in patterns, highways that curved like ribbons, fountains shooting water into the air as if the city breathed in rhythm. Zoe pressed her face to the window, laughing softly at every new landmark. Zara stayed closer to the door, her fingers tapping a slow pattern against her thigh. She wasn't scared. She just didn't know where her unease was coming from yet. When the car turned off the main road and into a gated residential area, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. Security guards stepped aside without checking anything. Gates opened before the driver rolled down the window. It looked smooth. Too smooth. Ward watched this part on city CCTV later, and the speed of the access raised a question he couldn't shake. Who else could move through checkpoints like this? The villa sat on a stretch of coastline that looked untouched. Tall palm trees. A view of the ocean that felt endless. The entrance alone looked like something out of an architecture magazine. Arched doorways, warm lighting, white stone floors polished to a mirror shine. The twins filmed everything, talking over each other as they walked inside. Their voices echoed down halls wider than anything they'd seen before. Staff lined the entrance, well-dressed, polite, efficient. They took the girls' luggage with practiced hands. They bowed slightly, but something about their faces made Zara pause. They smiled, but their eyes held nothing. No warmth. No curiosity. Just procedure. Zoe didn't notice. She was too busy capturing the ceiling on her phone, amazed by the details carved into it. The house manager led them through the villa, showing them the living area, the pool, the dining space, and the hallway leading to their rooms. The tour was quick, almost rushed. Certain doors remained shut. When Zoe reached for one handle, the manager stepped between them and said, "Private wing." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. His tone made Zara step back without asking more. Ward replayed that clip several times. It was the first moment Zara's instincts surfaced clearly. She slowed her steps. She watched the staff quietly. She scanned the hallways the way someone scans for exits in a room they don't fully trust. And even in footage, Ward could see her weighing the difference between gratitude and caution. The view from their balcony stole Zoe's breath. She ran outside, arms outstretched, the city behind them glowing like scattered jewels. Zara followed, recording her sister spinning, laughing, whispering, "We're really here." That video would later become one of Ward's most difficult pieces of evidence to watch. Joy captured hours before the world shifted. Dinner that night was prepared by a private chef, every dish arranged like art. Kareem arrived halfway through, greeting them with a warmth that came across as effortless. He asked about their flight. He asked if the rooms were comfortable. He asked about their goals and dreams, like he'd known them longer than a few messages exchanged online. Ward listened carefully to the recording. Kareem spoke with calm confidence, the kind that gathers trust without force. He never crossed a line. He never acted strange. It made everything harder to detect danger wrapped in comfort, warning signs hidden behind charm. During dinner, Zoe told him how excited she was to see more of Dubai. Kareem smiled gently and said they would explore soon. Zara's smile faltered for a moment, and she excused herself to the bathroom. Ward had paused that security footage. Just a few seconds of Zara staring at her reflection, breathing deeply, trying to steady something inside herself. Later that night, after the girls returned to their rooms, Zara sent a friend a message. Something feels off. She didn't explain. She didn't want to worry Zoe. She just needed to say it to someone. Meanwhile, on her bed, Zoe typed out her own message to a friend. This is insane in a good way. Two sisters in the same house, experiencing the same world but feeling it through completely different lenses. Hope and instinct pulling in opposite directions. Ward took note of both messages, not to judge, but to understand how two paths can move in parallel before breaking apart. As the night deepened, the villa grew quiet. The girls filmed a few more clips matching pajamas, balcony lights, a short dance in their mirror. It looked harmless. It looked peaceful. It looked like two young women finally getting a taste of the life they'd imagined for themselves. But the camera never captured the locked doors, the restricted hallways, the staff who whispered among themselves after the twins passed. Ward caught those details in surveillance footage, not in the girls' videos. And then came the moment that marked the end of their first 24 hours in Dubai and the beginning of something neither of them could foresee. At 11:42 p.m., on their second night in the villa, both of their phones stopped transmitting. No sound, no warning, just a sudden silence across two devices that had stayed active all day. Ward marked that timestamp with a heavy pen stroke, because that was the moment. The twins disappeared from their own story. Before we move into what happened next, take a moment to support the work we do here. If you're finding this case as gripping and heartbreaking as we are, hit the notification bell, subscribe to Crime Deck, and share this video with someone who needs to understand how quickly trust can turn into danger. And let me ask you this. If you were in Zara's shoes, would you have trusted the luxury around you? Or listened to the quiet voice telling you something wasn't right? Your thoughts matter. Now, let's continue. The last time Zara and Zoe appeared on camera live was at 11:41 p.m. They were in the hallway outside their rooms, talking softly, unaware that every step they took was being recorded by a system they didn't know was watching. Ward studied that footage until he could picture the shadows without pressing play. 1 minute later, at 11:42 p.m., both of their phones went silent. It wasn't a weak signal. It wasn't a dead battery. It was a clean, simultaneous stop, like someone had reached out and switched off their connection to the world. 9 minutes after that, the villa's internal CCTV crashed. Not gradually, not in fragments. It went dark all at once. Ward stared at the timestamps, again and again, because timing meant everything in cases like this. Those 9 minutes became the gap that carried the answers no one could reach. A neighbor later reported hearing a scream, a short burst of fear that cut through the quiet. They couldn't identify the voice. They couldn't tell where it came from, but they remembered the sound enough to report it. Ward marked that detail carefully. It wasn't proof, but it was the only human reaction captured from outside the villa that night. Inside, the staff movement logs told their own story. Several employees rushed toward the restricted wing at the exact time the footage cut out. Their pace was fast, too fast for routine tasks. Ward wondered if they were responding to something or participating in something. That question gnawed at him as he reviewed each line of digital movement. One sensor recorded glass breaking at 11:44 p.m. Another captured a drop in voltage that made the hallway lights flicker for a moment. It was the only remaining trace of activity inside the villa during the blackout. Every other detail had been erased or never recorded in the first place. At 12:03 a.m., the first vehicle left the property. A black SUV, the same model that had picked the girls up at the airport. At 1:17 a.m., a second vehicle pulled out, this one unregistered, with no plates visible on the grainy exterior footage. Ward studied the angles, the reflections, the faint outlines, anything that could tell him who was inside. But the footage was too controlled, too convenient. And then came morning. A construction crew working on the outskirts of the city spotted something in the sand, a tarp, half covered, heavy enough that two workers struggled to move it. When they pulled it open, they found Zoe. Her body left with no attempt to hide what had been done to her. Ward's breath caught when he saw the scene in forensic photographs. Even seasoned investigators paused that day. Hours later, on the other side of the city, a second alert came in. Another body, this time Zara. Carefully placed, not buried, just left. Her eyes removed with precision Ward couldn't ignore. Two sisters, two different forms of violence. Two dump sites chosen for reasons no one yet understood. Ward stood over the second location long after the evidence team finished. He felt the heat rising from the ground. He felt the weight of the silence around him. And he felt anger, quiet, steady, the kind that settles deep in the chest and refuses to leave. The girls had been alive just hours before. They had filmed themselves dancing in a mirror, laughing on a balcony. Now their lives had been split into two separate crime scenes. Later, during a review of their phones, analysts found something Ward wasn't prepared for. Zoe's final voice memo. It was short, soft, almost peaceful. "Zara's scared. I just want this to be perfect." Ward listened to it once, then again, and again. Each time, the message carried a new weight. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't fear. It was hope. Hope that everything would turn out well. Hope that Zara's unease was just nerves. Hope that the trip wasn't what it was becoming. The moral weight of what Ward had to do next crushed him. He had to call Martha. He had to tell her the daughters she prayed for, saved for, worked for, were gone. But he couldn't tell her everything, not yet. Not the details, not the condition, not the parts of the report that would tear her heart apart before investigators even knew the truth. Ward chose his words carefully, steadying his voice even as his hands tightened around the phone. He told Martha there had been a discovery. He told her identities were being confirmed. He told her he would update her as soon as more information arrived. He didn't tell her how he stepped outside afterward, leaned against the wall, and stayed there until his breathing slowed. Hours later, as Ward pieced together the conflicting footage and the timeline, his phone buzzed with a message from an unlisted number. No name, no context, just 6 words. They weren't the first. "Be careful." Ward stared at the screen, the chill running through him sharper than anything else he'd seen that night. Because someone out there wasn't warning him about danger. They were warning him about a pattern. For 2 days after the girls' bodies were recovered, Ward barely slept. He moved between evidence logs, phone records, and timelines until his vision blurred. The anonymous message, "They weren't the first. Be careful," kept replaying in his mind like a whisper that refused to fade. He knew it wasn't a threat. It was a push, a direction, and he couldn't ignore it, even if he didn't yet understand what it meant. On the morning of the 3rd day, a package appeared at his apartment door. No return label, no stamp indicating where it had come from. Just a small brown box, light enough that it barely made a sound when he lifted it. Ward set it on the table, studying it the way someone studies a confession. He knew whatever waited inside would change the trajectory of this investigation. He just didn't know how far. When he finally opened it, he found a burner phone taped to the bottom. No instructions, no note, only one icon on the screen, a single video file. Ward hesitated before pressing play, steadying his breath as the footage began. The first image was a dimly lit basement, the camera shaky as if hidden. Ward leaned closer. Then he saw them women lying on narrow tables, unconscious, unmoving. Their wrists were strapped down. Their breathing was slow. Their faces showed no awareness of the room around them. Ward felt something cold move up his spine. He didn't blink. Medical staff moved between them with precision. They wore gloves, masks, not in fear of infection, but in routine trained steps, practiced motions. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't panic. This was a system. Ward felt the shock cut through him as he realized he wasn't looking at isolated violence. He was looking at a process. Coded coolers lined the wall. The labels weren't names. They weren't dates. They were numbers, paired with markings Ward didn't recognize. He wrote them down anyway, knowing he could analyze them later. The staff members exchanged short commands, pointing to charts he couldn't read through the grainy footage. The camera captured a tray of tools next, sharp, clean, arranged with care. Tools meant for surgery, not rescue. Then the camera operator shifted, and Ward saw him. Kareem, standing at a distance, watching, not shocked, not uncertain, observing with the calm of someone supervising work they had approved. Ward's jaw tightened. This was the moment everything in him broke and rebuilt at the same time. Rage came first, a deep, heavy wave he swallowed before it could blur what he needed to see. Then resolve followed, steadying his breath. The footage kept moving. One of the women stirred slightly, and as a medic repositioned her wrist, a small bracelet slipped into view. Ward froze the frame so fast the audio cracked. His heart dropped. It was Zara's bracelet, the same bracelet found on her sister, the same bracelet from home videos, the one she wore on the plane, the one that stayed with her even after everything else was taken. Ward leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table as if he could pull her back from the screen. The pain hit him first sharp, unfair, crushing. Then guilt rose right behind it. Guilt for not stopping what he hadn't known was coming. Guilt for seeing the girls alive only through recordings. Guilt for being too late in every way that mattered. He didn't speak. He didn't swear. He didn't cry out. He cried silently, shoulders heavy, breath thin. The kind of grief only investigators understand, the grief of knowing the truth, but not being able to reverse any of it. He let the tears fall because not allowing them would have made him less human. When he finally wiped his eyes, he replayed the footage from the beginning, forcing himself to study every corner, every shadow. How many women were there? How many coolers? How many steps in this process? How long had this operation been running? And the most painful question, how many victims never reached a morgue, never received an investigation, never had a name attached to their final moments? The questions came fast. The answers stayed out of reach. But one thing became clear. Zara and Zoe hadn't stumbled into a single act of cruelty. They had been absorbed into a network that operated quietly, confidently, with enough resources to erase traces before authorities could react. Ward's anger sharpened into determination. He couldn't undo the past. He couldn't return the girls to their mother, but he could expose what had been hidden. He knew what had to come next. Ward packed a small bag. Not much, just essentials and his credentials. He booked a one-way ticket to Dubai without informing his department. He didn't call anyone. He didn't ask permission. His hands shook slightly as he closed his laptop, but his voice was steady when he whispered, "I'm not letting this disappear." He wasn't moving as a detective now. He was moving as a man who had seen too much to look away. And as he walked out the door, heading toward the airport, the weight of the girl's final hours followed him like a vow he intended to keep. Before we continue, take a second to support the work we do here. If this case has pulled you in, if you feel the urgency of what Ward just uncovered, hit the notification bell, subscribe to Crime Deck, and share this video with someone who needs to understand how deep this investigation truly goes. And here's a question only you can answer. If a truth this painful landed on your doorstep, would you have the strength to follow it no matter where it led? Ward arrived in Dubai with one goal. Find the truth. The system kept stepping around. He didn't announce his presence. He didn't alert local authorities. Instead, he moved quietly through neighborhoods tourists never see, into streets where information passed faster than paperwork, and into rooms where silence was often bought, not given. His first lead took him to a small apartment complex where former villa staff were rumored to stay before being reassigned or dismissed. Ward stood outside the building in the early morning heat, listening to voices behind thin walls. When he knocked on the first door, the man who opened it froze the moment he saw Ward's badge. He didn't wait for questions. He slammed the door and ran out the back exit. Ward chased him just long enough to see fear, not guilt, in the man's eyes. That fear told him everything. These staff weren't accomplices by choice. They were trapped in a network so tight that even speaking the wrong name could erase them. At the second apartment, a woman cracked the door only wide enough to see Ward's face. She recognized the look in his eyes, the look of someone who had already seen too much. She whispered, "This wasn't the first. It won't be the last," and shut the door before he could respond. Her voice shook, her hands shook, even the lock clicked with hesitation. Ward wrote down every detail, every tremor, knowing fear carries truth when nothing else does. Next, he followed a tip that led him to a rundown clinic on the outskirts of the city. The building looked abandoned, broken windows, peeling paint, yet Ward felt a presence inside. He entered slowly, stepping over debris. The faint smell of chemicals clung to the air. Old medical charts littered the ground. It wasn't a functioning clinic anymore, but what remained hinted at what it once hid. A figure appeared at the end of the hallway, a woman in a faded nursing uniform. She didn't run. She didn't flinch. She simply said, "You're not supposed to be here," in a voice so tired it carried its own confession. Ward approached, showing her Zara's bracelet. She looked at it as if it burned her hands. Tears filled her eyes before he asked a single question. She leaned against the wall, covering her mouth with trembling fingers. Then she spoke. They were selected, evaluated, processed. Ward felt the room tilt slightly, but he steadied himself. He needed her to continue. She pointed to an old map on the wall, outlining places where victims had been taken before. Not names, not dates, just marks enough to show a pattern. She explained how each woman brought in was assigned a category based on what the buyers wanted. Zara had been targeted for her eyes. Zoe for brain tissue used in high-risk research markets Ward had only heard rumors about. Ward's breath caught. His chest tightened. He nearly collapsed from the weight of what he was hearing. He held onto the table beside him just to stay upright. Pain hit him first, then fury, then a helplessness so sharp it felt like it cut through bone. The nurse stepped closer, tears falling freely now. "I told myself I had no choice," she whispered. "They take passports, they threaten families. If you refuse, you disappear." Her voice cracked, and Ward saw the desperation of someone who had lived under a command she never agreed to. He didn't judge her. He saw her fear, her regret, her exhaustion. She wasn't a mastermind. She was a survivor who happened to witness things the world refused to acknowledge. Ward pulled out a notepad, but she shook her head. "No writing," she said. "No evidence here. If they know I spoke, I'm done." He lowered the pen slowly. "Then help me another way." She hesitated long enough for Ward to see the war inside her. Then she turned, walked to a drawer hidden behind a broken cabinet, and pulled out a small flash drive wrapped in cloth. She held it the way someone holds a final confession, careful, fragile, scared. She placed it in Ward's hand and whispered, "Everything is on here." Ward didn't move. He didn't breathe for a moment. The weight of the drive felt heavier than anything he had carried in his career. It wasn't just data. It was evidence that could shatter the shield around Kareem. It was truth, raw, painful, undeniable. Truth that could end lives or save them. He looked at the nurse, her shoulders shaking, her eyes pleading for a future she wasn't sure she would get. The moral line in Ward's mind blurred, saving her versus saving countless women who might follow. And for the first time, he understood the cost of exposing a network powerful enough to erase people without leaving a trace. He thanked her quietly. She bowed her head, stepping back into the shadows of the hallway as if retreating into a place she no longer belonged. Ward walked out of the clinic with the flash drive pressed firmly in his pocket. His steps were steady, but inside he felt the edges of instability. He wasn't protected by his badge anymore. He wasn't acting on orders. He was hunting a man shielded by wealth, connections, and a system built to keep him untouchable. But Ward didn't care about the risk. He had the truth now, and he wasn't leaving without exposing it. Ward didn't sleep the night he received the flash drive. He spent hours watching its contents in silence, frame by frame, file by file, until the sun rose over Dubai in washed-out stripes. Every image cut deeper than the last. Every document sharpened the truth. By morning, what he carried wasn't suspicion anymore. It was proof. He knew exactly where Kareem would be that evening. A private event reserved for the wealthy and connected people who floated above consequences, protected by polished tables, soft lighting, and conversations that never touched the ground. Ward walked in without hesitation. He didn't belong there, and every guard knew it, but he carried himself with a certainty that made people step aside before their minds caught up. He spotted Kareem across the room before Kareem noticed him. The man was laughing quietly with a group of dignitaries, perfectly at ease, as though no horror in the world could stain him. Ward felt the anger rise in his chest, but he swallowed it down. He needed clarity, not rage. He needed this moment to mean something. When their eyes met, Kareem's smile didn't fall. It shifted slowly, deliberately into something controlled. He walked toward Ward with the confidence of a man who had never been held accountable for anything in his life. The room seemed to grow quieter around them. Ward waited until they stood a few feet apart. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't flash his badge. He simply said, "I know what you did to Zara and Zoe." Kareem chuckled softly, as though hearing a child make an impossible claim. "You have stories," he replied. "I have power. Guess which one wins?" Ward held his stare. "You watch them like they were inventory." Kareem tilted his head, studying Ward with a strange mix of interest and amusement. "You stepped out of your jurisdiction. You crossed borders. And for what? Two tourists who went where they shouldn't have?" He leaned in slightly. "The world doesn't care about girls like them." Ward felt his breath stop for half a second. Not because he doubted the truth, he knew it, but because hearing it spoken aloud by the man responsible struck him harder than any threat could. He gripped the inside of his palm to keep his voice steady. "They had a mother who loved them," Ward said quietly. For the first time, Kareem's smile slipped just a flicker, quick but visible. "Love," he said, "doesn't change the world. Influence does." Ward saw it clearly then. The legal system couldn't touch this man. Paperwork wouldn't reach him. Evidence could disappear. Witnesses could vanish. Wealth built walls higher than law. Ward felt something break inside him, not hope, but the belief that justice always came from courts. He whispered, "You think no one will ever know?" Kareem leaned back, confidence restored. "By next month, their case will be forgotten. News cycles move fast. People forget faster. And your career," he paused, savoring the moment, "will end before anyone listens to you." Ward didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch just long enough for tension to gather between them. He thought of the girls' last messages, their bracelets, their dreams, their mother waiting for an update that would never bring comfort. He thought of the nurse who risked her life to hand him the flash drive. He thought of every victim whose name never reached a file. Then clarity arrived, calm and sharp. "You're right," Ward said softly. "Courts won't punish you." Kareem smirked. "Finally, you understand. But the world will." Ward finished. Kareem's expression froze for the first time. A crack small, but unmistakable. Ward took one step closer, lowering his voice. "You build a system to stay hidden. I'm about to take that away." Before Kareem could respond, Ward turned and walked out of the hall. Each step felt lighter than the last, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he finally knew what had to be done. He no longer needed permission. He no longer needed approval. What he needed was truth, and he had it, in every file, every image, every timestamp. Outside, the night air hit him like a jolt. He sat on a bench across from the event venue, opened his laptop, and connected to the strongest network he could find. His hands shook not with fear, but with the weight of the decision he was making. He uploaded everything. The footage, the medical files, the staff logs, the photos, the recordings. He didn't send them to a single agency. He sent them to global media outlets, human rights groups, investigative journalists, and online communities that never stopped digging. He scattered the truth across the world like shards of glass no one could collect in time. By the time the upload finished, Ward exhaled for the first time in hours. He closed the laptop gently, almost reverently. He hadn't struck Kareem. He hadn't thrown a punch. He hadn't shouted. He had done something far worse to a man like that. He had exposed him. And he knew the world would react, with the truth no longer in Ward's hands, but in everyone's. The world didn't react slowly. It reacted like a match dropped in dry grass, fast, loud, impossible to contain. Within hours of Ward releasing the files, global newsrooms interrupted regular programming. Images of Zara and Zoe filled screens across continents. Their smiles, their home videos, their final trip photos side by side with the horrors Ward had uncovered. Commentators struggled to speak without shaking their heads. Reporters paused mid-sentence, weighing the impact of every word. And something rare happened. People listened. In Atlanta, where the twins grew up, crowds formed outside city buildings. Not organized, not planned, just people who felt pulled into the gravity of the truth. Mothers held candles. Young women held posters. Men wiped their faces with the backs of their hands, stunned that two girls who looked like their nieces, their neighbors, their friends had been swallowed by a world that treated them as resources instead of lives. Across the ocean, protests surged in front of Dubai embassies. Signs read, "They were not property," and "Who protects the voiceless?" Chanting rose from streets that had never heard these names before. People didn't need to know the girls personally. The footage, the files, the precision of the violence, anyone with a conscience felt the weight of it. Karim responded the way powerful men often do, with denial cloaked in poise. He appeared at a press conference wearing a perfectly tailored suit, speaking of misunderstandings, fabrications, and targeted defamation. But his voice lacked the confidence from earlier. Cameras caught the stiffness in his hands. Reporters pressed harder than his team expected. International agencies began freezing his accounts, halting business transactions. Lawsuits surfaced from families whose daughters had vanished under similar circumstances. Ward watched these developments from home, not with triumph, but with the stillness of someone who had carried this truth alone for too long. Yet, despite everything, Karim walked free. No handcuffs. No arrest photo. Not yet. And that "not yet" became the question the world couldn't stop asking. Back in Georgia, Martha Bennett held a press conference of her own. She stood behind a small podium, gripping a printed photo of her daughters. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "My daughters were not disposable," she said, her gaze steady. "They were not objects. They had dreams. They had futures. And someone decided they didn't deserve either." Cameras clicked. Some reporters cried. Even the officer standing beside her lowered his eyes. Back home, Martha sat on her porch with family members. The news trucks had faded for the evening. A quiet settled over the neighborhood. She whispered their names. Zara. Zoe. As if reciting a prayer the world needed to hear again and again. She ran her thumb across the edge of a photo, pausing at their smiles. "People know your names now," she murmured. "You mattered. You still matter." In another part of the city, Ward faced the consequences of stepping outside protocol. He was called into multiple meetings, questioned about his conduct, reprimanded for bypassing official channels. But none of it took the purpose out of his eyes. Even stripped of certain duties, even warned about professional boundaries, he stood firm. Because he knew something the system often forgets. Truth isn't always neat. It doesn't always wait for paperwork. Sometimes it forces its way into the world by any means necessary. A week after the story exploded, a mural of Zara and Zoe appeared on the side of a downtown Atlanta building. Their faces were painted in warm colors, bright and powerful, surrounded by flowers and patterns celebrating sisterhood. Strangers gathered under it, leaving candles, messages, bracelets, and drawings from children who didn't fully understand the story but felt the loss anyway. Ward visited the mural late one evening. He didn't touch it. He didn't take a picture. He just stood there, absorbing the voices around him. People telling stories about twin sisters they never met, asking how something so horrific could happen to girls who only wanted to see the world. He felt exhaustion, yes, a kind that sat in his bones. But beneath it, a small ember of hope glowed quietly. Not because the fight was over, but because the world had refused to turn away. Some questions, however, remained heavier than others. Would Karim ever stand in a courtroom? Would he ever face a judge without the shield of money and influence? How many networks like his still lived in the shadows? Unseen? Ward didn't know. Martha didn't know. The world didn't know. But silence was no longer part of the story. And as the mural lights flickered on, illuminating the twins' faces against the night sky, one truth settled in. The exposure didn't bring justice. Not fully. Not yet. But it broke the silence that once protected the powerful. And sometimes breaking silence is the first step toward justice, even when the path ahead remains uncertain. In a world where power hides in plain sight, remembering Zara and Zoe becomes an act of resistance, and refusing to look away becomes the closest thing to justice some families will ever see. In the end, Zara and Zoe's story forces us to confront a truth many people would rather avoid. Danger doesn't always come from shadows. Sometimes it arrives dressed in comfort, wrapped in charm, and backed by influence strong enough to make victims disappear without a sound. But tonight, their names were spoken. Their faces were seen. Their final hours were not hidden behind closed doors or buried under excuses. And because of that, Because their story reached you, silence lost a little of its power. If this case moved you, if it made you think differently about safety, trust, and the way some voices are ignored, please take a moment to support this work. Hit the like button, subscribe to Crime Deck, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a case that deserves to be heard. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how quickly a dream can turn into danger and how important it is to protect those who are too often overlooked. And before you go, sit with this one question. When justice fails, what does accountability look like, and who carries the weight of remembering? Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next case.